What is it about the Fender Stratocaster that has made it synonymous with the term electric guitar? I guarantee you that if you asked 100 people to draw a picture of an electric guitar, probably about 90 of them would draw a picture of this. Is it the space-age modular design? Is it the clear bell-like tones? Jeff Beck once said, quote, "My first wife said it's either that Strat or me, you know, and I give you 3 guesses which one went." Or is it the myriad of historical moments that have burned the Strat into our minds in the hands of some of guitar's greatest players? Today we're going to try to find out by looking at the top 10 moments in the Stratocaster's history, next on GH Top 10s. Hello friends, and welcome back to the Guitar Historian channel and your countdown show, GH Top 10s, which is just a little bit different than your father's top 10 list. Today we're not going to look at the greatest players who ever played a Strat, but at the 10 most seminal moments in history that helped to define the Fender Stratocaster as the pinnacle of design of the electric guitar. It's such a perfect design that it has not changed in nearly 70 years, and it probably won't change for another 70 either. But remember, if you like rock history content like this, be sure to subscribe to the Guitar Historian channel and click the bell icon below to get notified whenever I post a new video. And don't forget to like the video so that we can spread it far and wide amongst our fellow rock history lovers. Finally, remember that a portion of my 2022 YouTube proceeds will go to the Parent Project Muscular Dystrophy charity, who help children like my son Jake battle the disease by directly funding research and connecting families to trials in our search for a cure. Please see the link below in the description for ways that you can help out. But now, on with the countdown. Imagine if you can that there was actually an import ban on American goods to the UK for years following the Second World War. And then imagine that you were a successful musician who was obsessed with Buddy Holly and his Fender Stratocaster, but you couldn't get one. That was how it was for guitarist Hank Marvin, who was backing Cliff Richards in the Drifters, soon to be renamed the Shadows at the time. Such a magnanimous boss was Richard that he would purchase a Fiesta Red Strat for Hank, one with a maple fretboard and gold hardware. It had a decidedly pink hue to the red, such that Hank called it Flamingo Pink. Hank said upon receiving the axe, quote, "It came in a tweed Fender case with a red plush lining, and this magnificent looking thing was just lying inside. It was like something from space, really. It was so futuristic in its design. The 3 pickups, the white scratch plate, the red guitar, the beautiful bird's eye maple neck, and all the gold plating, it just looked sensational. We just looked at it for a while, then took it out of the case, tuned it up, and played it." Marvin would eventually give the Strat back to Richard after buying himself another red Strat, this one with a rosewood fretboard. But the image of Hank Marvin playing a Stratocaster on such hits as Apache was permanently burned into every British kid who followed in his footsteps going forward. This is Jimmy's first appearance on this list. I couldn't pick just one moment, so I included both of them. That's a teaser for you. Anyway, when Jimi Hendrix finally took the stage at Woodstock, it was estimated that over 50% of the people who had attended at the festival's height, over 400,000, had left. Due to weather and overruns, Hendrix's Sunday night slot had become a Monday morning one. Hendrix would play an incendiary 2-hour set to close out the show, and sandwiched in between a nearly 14-minute long version of Voodoo Child and Purple Haze was the awesome moment of Hendrix playing the Star-Spangled Banner unaccompanied. The hushed crowd watched in amazement as this master of the electric guitar played his Olympic white 1968 Stratocaster. It was clearly a watershed moment in the history of the Strat, and one of the most iconic images to come out of the Woodstock Festival. It's hard to believe that Jimi would be taken from us in little more than a year after that performance, and I can understand leaving a baseball game a little early once it's out of hand to beat the traffic, but leaving before Jimi Hendrix takes the stage? God, I'd like to talk to one of those folks to just see how badly they're kicking themselves 53 years later. Most people see Stevie Ray Vaughan as the second coming of Jimi Hendrix, but his playing style was actually a bit more in your face than Jimmy's, in my opinion. SRV lived the blues, and he delivered them with a sledgehammer tone, utilizing his Frankenstein Strat. Vaughan's number one was actually a 1963 body coupled with a 1962 neck and pickups from 1959. Stevie Ray's playing caused the guitar to undergo countless refrets until the neck became damaged beyond the ability to fix, and it was replaced by the neck of another of Vaughan's guitars, a 1962 Strat called Red. But that neck was in turn damaged when stage equipment fell on it. Vaughan used number one to such effect at Montreux in 1982 that it caught the attention of rock star David Bowie, who would tap Stevie Ray to play on his 1983 album Let's Dance. But shockingly, SRV and Double Trouble were actually booed quite a bit at Montreux, and the Jazz Festival hadn't heard Texas blues quite like that before. Sometimes people are just stupid. Number one is now in the possession of Stevie Ray's brother Jimmy, in retirement with its original 1962 neck back on it. When Jim Conlon of the Royal Show Band ordered a Stratocaster from the Fender factory in 1961, he'd ordered a Fiesta Red model to match that of Hank Marvin's that we spoke about a few minutes ago. He was a little miffed then when Fender mistakenly sent a Sunburst model to Conlon. Conlon quickly ordered a second Strat, making sure it was red, and when it arrived, he would sell the Sunburst model to a local music shop called Crowley's in Cork. No sooner did a young guitarist walk by it and see it standing in the window, the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. 16-year-old Rory Gallagher would drag his baby brother Donald down to the shop to show him the sight, and Donald remembered, quote, "The guitar was sitting in the window. It had pride of place there. Rory brought me down and he explained to me that it was similar to Buddy Holly's guitar. It was his ambition at the time to have a guitar just like Buddy Holly. I think every guitarist wanted one. To me, the contours and the shape of the instrument, it's a classic shape, similar to something like a spaceship. It wasn't what I had imagined. We were so used to the round shape of a guitar and the electronics were such a new thing. We couldn't understand how the sound could come from it. It was love at first sight. It was destiny." For much more on this legendary Strat, you can watch my episode of If Guitars Could Speak about Rory Strat right here. We all know the acrimonious split between Pink Floyd leaders Roger Waters and David Gilmour. The pair have only teamed up a handful of times since Waters left the group in 1984, and it's clear that they get along like oil and water. But sometimes not even a rock and roll feud can get in the way of a great moment. In 2010, Gilmour played a charity event for the Hoping Foundation in Oxfordshire, and he convinced Waters to join him on stage for the show by promising to play at one show during Waters' upcoming The Wall Live tour. So on May 12, 2011, during the O2 Arena show in London, David Gilmour appeared atop the wall once again, brandishing his legendary black Strat, which has been modded so many times I don't even think David remembers what year anything is anymore. But the simple act of showing up with that guitar sent the crowd into an absolute frenzy, with social media lighting up with rumors of a Pink Floyd reunion, and drummer Nick Mason also showed up that night. But Gilmour was quick to shut down the rumors with a blog post that said, quote, "I should remind you that tonight is most definitely a one-off. David is not repeating his special guest performance at a later occasion. I'm sorry to disappoint those of you with fingers crossed and tickets for later shows." Oh well. It's hard to overstate just how influential Bob Dylan was in his time. The folk community has very rigid and ritualistic rules, and part of those rules at the same time were to make the music in the most natural, basic way possible. So it's no surprise then that Dylan, a natural rebel, decided to buck that trend. Annoyed at festival organizers' dismissive nature of the Paul Butterfield Blues Band, Dylan decided against doing his usual acoustic set by saying, "F them, if they think they can keep electricity out of here, I'll do it." Dylan gathered the Butterfield Blues Band as a backing group, and that Sunday night went on and shocked the crowd, appearing with a 1962 Sunburst Stratocaster. Most attendees remember a mixed reaction, with some in the crowd absolutely loving the new direction, while others were mortified. Pete Seeger seemed to be trying to unplug the band, but later Seeger said that he was just trying to get them to turn down in order to sound better. What is clear is that it ruffled a lot of feathers in the folk community, with Dylan even continuing to get razzed at shows as late as 1966 as he continued to perform with electric backing bands. But the deed was done, and Dylan's sound was never the same. I also did a full rundown on this Strat as well in this episode right up here. When Chas Chandler brought Jimi Hendrix to London in 1966, with the hopes that it would kickstart his career, his instincts turned out to be right. Pairing Hendrix with drummer Mitch Mitchell and guitarist turned bass player Noel Redding, Hendrix would enjoy almost instant success in the UK. When it came time to return home to the US, however, Hendrix was still a mostly unknown name. But he had a powerful friend in his corner. Paul McCartney himself agreed to join the board of organizers of the upcoming Monterey Pop Festival on the agreement that Hendrix would play the festival in mid-June of 1967. Hendrix's incendiary set electrified the crowd, but he actually used two Stratocasters for the show. The first was a black Strat that he used to play Hey Joe, but eventually he switched to a white Strat, upon which he'd hand-painted a swirly floral design. As the show reached its apex at the end of Hendrix's version of Wild Thing, he put the guitar onto the stage, poured lighter fluid onto it, and set it ablaze. 17-year-old Ed Carafe had the best seat in the house right next to the stage, and he was so close that he needed to use his camera to shield his face from the heat of the burning guitar. He would take one of the most iconic photographs in rock and roll history that night, and after the show, Hendrix would say, quote, "I decided to destroy my guitar at the end of a song as a sacrifice. You sacrifice things you love. I love my guitar." You can't talk about great moments of the Strat without including its design and eventual sale. One of the amazing things about Leo Fender was that he was actually not a musician. Even though Fender created some of the most iconic guitar designs of all time, he relied heavily on the input of musicians to design the tool that they wanted. That's why after about 4 years of design and refinement of the Fender Telecaster, Leo knew he couldn't rest on his laurels, and that it was time to come up with something new. Fender had actually begun working on floating bridges that he mistakenly called tremolos, rather than the correct musical term, which would really be vibratos. Pedal steel player Freddie Tavares was credited with drawing out the design of the Strat, which was inspired by the new double cutaway of the Precision bass launched in 1953. Guitarist Rex Gallion is credited with bringing up the need for a contoured body, and after all the ingredients were mixed up into Leo Fender's strange brew, with Fender sales chief Don Randall coming up with the space-age name, the Stratocaster, as the cherry on top, the guitar was finally introduced in the spring and then offered for sale in October of 1954. Fast forward all the way to 2014 when vintage guitar dealer George Gruen purchased a 1954 Strat that was sold in that month of October with a serial number of 0100. Although one would think that that was the 100th Strat, Gruen believed that Fender didn't use that style of serial numbers and that this was actually the earliest known production-run Stratocaster ever purchased. Gruen would go on to sell the guitar for $250,000 later that same year. It's funny that you can walk into a guitar store today and purchase a brand new American Strat, and chances are that not only would it look like its 1954 counterpart, it would probably sound a lot like it too. Even though Fender enjoyed a run of success in the late 50s and early 60s with the Stratocaster, it seemed that the late 60s were all about their biggest competitor, Gibson. Indeed, the Les Paul, which had been completely modified and rebranded in the early 60s as the SG, was experiencing a resurgence, and one of the biggest guitar gods on the planet, Eric Clapton, was known to play mostly Gibson guitars, among them an SG painted by the Fool and a cherry red ES-335. But Clapton would drastically change his sound in 1970, and he would unveil his second most famous axe, Brownie, on the front cover of his first solo album, Eric Clapton, and the back cover of his next project, Layla, by Derek and the Dominos. Brownie was a stock 1956 Strat, but it was Clapton's second Strat, Blackie, that became more well-known. Clapton found a used section in a music store called Show Bud in Nashville, where he found 6 Fender Stratocasters in the back room. He bought every guitar and over the course of several months ran them through the paces, choosing what he felt was the best neck, the best body, and the best electronics, and making one super guitar out of the pieces. He gave the other 3 to Steve Winwood, Pete Townsend, and George Harrison. Clapton would go on to use Blackie for 12 years on stage, and these days he plays only his signature Strats, made especially for him by the Fender Custom Shop. For the last 52 years, Clapton has been a Fender man, only sparingly playing other models for special occasions. It's hard to overstate what Clapton's influence has meant to the sales of the Stratocaster. One could safely say that he has probably inspired more sales of the model than any other guitarist, easily. Think about it. Everyone knows how Buddy Holly's tragically short career ended in 1959, but on December 1st, 1957, it seemed that the brilliant young rocker was on the verge of superstardom and would live forever. And in a way, he did. Buddy Holly and the Crickets appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show to promote their new album, The Chirpin' Crickets, and play their new single, That'll Be the Day, and a song Buddy had written for drummer Allison's new wife, Peggy Sue. Holly appeared with his fresh new Sunburst Fender Stratocaster, a 1955 that he traded in for his first choice, a 1952 Gibson Les Paul, an amp that he'd bought the previous year. Surprised? You can see all about it right here. I got you covered. But as we all know, the 1952 Les Pauls were notoriously hard to play, and Holly had been taking lessons from a player in Lubbock who had bought a brand new Strat, and the design and sound of the instrument caught his eye. That and the problems that he was having with his gold top led him to return the guitar for the Sunburst Stratocaster. When Holly used the guitar on Sullivan's Show that wintry 1957 night, it was a good bet that it was almost everyone's first look at the futuristic design. Nowhere did this have a bigger impact than in the UK, and when Holly toured there in 1958, it led to many top acts like Hank Marvin and Bill Conlon of the Royal Show Band grabbing their own, or wishing upon a star that someday they would be able to afford one themselves. Well, that's another episode of GH Top 10s. I hope you enjoyed this look at some of the iconic moments that made up the history of the most ubiquitous guitar of all time. The Fender Stratocaster is the ultimate tool, a thing of beauty while also being a thing of duty, a workhorse, and often a blank canvas for artists to put their own stamp on the instrument while retaining its iconic sound, shape, and design. Be sure to subscribe to the channel for a future episode like this on the Gibson Les Paul. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.